You're listening to the voice of Nassau Community College on 90.3 WHPC. My name is Bill McIntyre, and it's time for this week's Long Island News. It's the show that talks to newsmakers from Nassau and Suffolk County that matter to Long Island and Long Islanders like you. So each week, we'll have a conversation about issues that affect all of us. I live on Long Island, and like all of you, I want to know more about where my tax dollars are going, and I want to know more about the people making the big decisions that affect all of us. Well, our guest today is Melanie D'Arrigo, a healthcare advocate, community organizer, and mother of three, who is a Democrat running in New York's 3rd Congressional District. Melanie has always lived on the South Shore of Long Island and was the first in her family to attend college at Barnard University. She earned her Master's of Science degree from the School of Health Professions at Long Island University and has worked as a healthcare advocate and strategist ever since. Well, Melanie, welcome to this week's Long Island News. How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you, Bill? Thanks for having me on.
Good. Oh, well, and you know what? We may as well start out this way because we're probably going to have conversations and things that we won't get to. So we'll get you to promise that you'll come back the next time. This won't be your only appearance, right?
Absolutely.
And
yes.
You can tell us how things are going along in the campaign and all of that.
Absolutely. I'd love to come back.
Great. So, I mean, there's a lot of things in the news that we can talk about, certainly we've had some discussions with others about how are you feeling about the pending decision to overturn Roe v. Wade?
I mean, look, I think for those of us who have been paying attention, we've seen this writing on the wall for a very long time. I think it's why we saw the outrage that we did when Brett Kavanaugh was appointed, and then later when Amy Coney Barrett was appointed to the Supreme Court, both of whom have made no secrets about expressing their thoughts on Roe, and that, while they may have said one thing in the confirmation hearing, prior to that, they had been pretty explicit that, they did not believe that Roe was precedent and settled law. Look, here's what we do know, that it's very likely that Roe, as we know it, will be gutted, if not overturned outright by the end of this month or early July. This will overwhelmingly impact women, poor women, Indigenous women, the LGBTQ community, Black and Brown communities, service members, government workers. But frankly, this is now going to affect everyone else because, look, while in New York we have some pretty strong state laws in place protecting the right to abortion, this is going to factor into our decision. So where we travel, where we send our kids to college, right? And I think that most of us would agree that our rights shouldn't change depending which state we're in our own country. So I can tell you that as a mom and as an organizer who's been on the front lines of this fight for a very long time, I actually serve as a Nassau delegate to the National Organization for Women. I was down in D.C. protesting Kavanaugh and protesting Amy Coney Barrett because I knew it was coming. I am outraged. I am angry. I am devastated, but I am not one to sit and stir. I am one to turn that anger into action. And I think, it's a big part of why I'm running for office today.
Yeah, it's certainly enough of a fire to put under you to make you go do something. I've talked to many politicians, and I've always brought up that idea of, when they pass a law, they ought to have a committee called the Committee of Unintended Consequences, just to see how those strands of effect can go out into the public for things that you didn't even think of when you brought up the bill. My problem with this one is this is not unintended consequences that you're talking about. These are totally intentional.
They're absolutely intentional.
That's what makes me sick.
Well, it should. But, here's the thing, right? For decades now, the Hyde Amendment has been law. And for the listeners who may not know what the Hyde Amendment is, let me just go over that really quickly, okay? So after Roe became precedent, about a year later, the Hyde Amendment was introduced. And it's one of what you may hear of as poison pills, right? Or as stuffing the sausage in a bill. And so it's usually a rider that gets stuffed in. And essentially it prohibits any federal funds from going toward abortion, right? So when we think about federal funds, these are programs like Medicaid, right, which help provide health care to the poorest and most marginalized communities. But like what I went over earlier, it mostly impacts young women, Black and brown women, Indigenous women, the LGBTQ community, and government workers. So why this is important, right? There are two main reasons. One, we should all agree that abortion care is health care. It is health care. And you know, this opens the door. What if one day we say, well, actually, Viagra is not health care, so we're going to take that away? We're not so sure. You know, any procedure, we're going to take that away. And that could happen, right? So we really need to get on board, and everyone needs to understand that abortion care is health care. Health care is a right, and everyone should have it. We shouldn't pick and choose which healthcare services are available to us and which are not. But secondarily, now, look, and you know this, Bill, for decades, there have been abortion rights activists, healthcare activists who have pushed to repeal the Hyde Amendment. And sometimes you get met with something like, oh, that's hysterical. Roe is the law of the land, right? But here's what we see. When we leave that door open, even a little bit, eventually someone's going to come and kick it open. And that is this moment that we find ourselves in now. So I am calling on every person, every man, every woman, every non-binary person in this country to stand up and fight, because this is just the first domino to fall. You know, we love America because America is accepting, supposedly, of all people, right? And if we believe that, now is the time to fight, because this is just the beginning.
Yeah. It stunned me. I mean, it's been a law for 50 years. And I thought, well, it's pretty safe. Silly me.
Well, and look, I think, you know, that it's part of this disinformation campaign and manipulation campaign to bring in new voters and twist the facts, right? I mean, we have seen just wild nonsense theories being circulated in terms of what abortion is and when it happens. And it's all nonsense, right? At the end of the day, it is nonsense. There is no party that is pro-life that doesn't mind kids getting shot up in schools, that wants to strip benefits, food benefits, SNAP benefits, right, from children, that doesn't want to provide housing for children. Just it's absolutely absurd. And I think we need to start calling it out. You know, what I'd love to talk about, if I could for a minute, is my vision for protecting reproductive rights. You know, we had talked a moment ago about the Hyde Amendment. I have been an ardent supporter of repealing Hyde. Barbara Lee has a bill called the Each Woman Act that really needs to pass, that would repeal Hyde so that everyone has access to abortion when they need it. However, look, we've heard a lot about the Women's Health Protection Act, which passed the House and, you know, has not gotten anywhere, you know, unfortunately. But look, this is just the beginning. We have to codify Roe, absolutely. We have to repeal the Hyde Amendment, absolutely. But if we really want to protect our rights moving forward, not just abortion rights, but we know that same-sex marriage is next. And, you know, unfortunately, there's a whole long line behind that of issues that are important. We need to pass the Judiciary Act. The Judiciary Act would help us unrig the Supreme Court and expand it. Something I want to point out, because a lot of folks are unaware, since the inception of the Supreme Court, the number of justices has fluctuated 9 different times. So it's not new. It's not a radical idea. What's radical, in fact, is to live under minority rule with an extreme right-packed court, which is where we are now. And if I could just take a moment, because sometimes if you're not really paying attention to the political process or the judiciary process, we can think, well, look, you know, fair is fair. This is just the way the deck was drawn. And, you know, President Trump was able to nominate these justices. But the reality is that there are dark money groups, the Federalist Society being one of them, that launched these major campaigns that fund politicians to put in and install these ultra right-wing justices. That is the case with Amy Coney Barrett. That is the case with Brett Kavanaugh. And right now we have a very biased Supreme Court. That should alarm everyone, even if you are finding yourself on the ultra-right conservative side of the political spectrum. If that is who you are, that's okay. You might be happy that the court is ultra-right, but that is not its intent. The Supreme Court was never intended to be the absolute power, right? So we're seeing a corruption issue, and it's corroding every system of our government. And that is something that every single citizen should be concerned about.
Well, you talk about, it's like the stories around Roe v. Wade and the things that, I found it very disturbing to find out that Devin Nunes quit Congress to become the chief of a social media company. And I thought about that for a minute, and what that said to me was that Devin Nunes, and maybe Republicans collectively, believe there's more power in propaganda than Congress.
Well, I think that's right. And unfortunately, the last presidential election cycle, we saw that. We saw what happened with Cambridge Analytica. If you remember that, the news cycle was so wild, right, that we were getting bombarded with all types of crises, 5-alarm fires. But Cambridge Analytica, they did a deep dive into social media, and they looked at behavior patterns, and then they manipulated thousands and thousands of, if not millions of people into believing, these crazy conspiracy theories. And it works on both sides, right? Fear is a powerful motivator. We know that. And I think it's a really dangerous place that we find ourselves in, because we know that more and more folks are getting their news from social media. And I think that Congress really needs to step in and make sure that, facts are important, and, journalism as a whole could certainly benefit from returning to fact-based media and fact-based journalism. But I think on social media, we definitely need some guardrails in place if we want to protect our democracy.
Yeah, I think it's an understatement to say that facts are good. No, facts are necessary. There's a quote that I heard the other day that said, democracy depends on agreed upon truths. Autocracy on agreed upon lies. And until we separate those two things, we got a troubled country. We really do.
And that's where we find ourselves right now.
Yeah, but people are screaming for unity. And some of them just wish to, push all of this stuff under the rug and say, let's just say it never happened.
Right.
But it did happen, and it really needs to be dealt with. I just had a delightful thought that if Mr. Trump got jailed, and that maybe all of those judges he appointed would not be able to stay. You had a rogue president who appointed federal judges to the court with the express purpose of doing what you said, to tilt the Supreme Court in a direction. I, for one, I wouldn't be so mad if it just happened and that was the outcome of things. But when it's done purposely, that gets my goat. It should get your goat. Yeah, the manipulation is... It
is very intentional. It is very strategic. And frankly, look, you got to give it to the GOP, right? They are masterful at this. They're very, very good at it. And I think, look, we can have conversations about, the political realm and how the political piece of politics is really, I think, eroding and destroying our democracy. My campaign and my candidacy has always been about fighting for people. As you mentioned at the beginning of the show, I'm a community organizer. Right. I have spent many, many years building advocacy, knocking on doors, bringing people together, educating people. And we have flipped Republicans at the doors. And I think there's a reason for that, right? It's because, it's easy, just like in a sports setting, right? Everyone wants to be on the winning team, and we want to be part of something as human beings. That's human nature. We want to be part of something. But we have moved politically so far away from the purpose of government that now it's not just affecting, lower socioeconomic classes of people. It's not just affecting the middle class, but even the upper middle class is now feeling the brunt of all of this. And I would say even the wealthiest among us to some extent is feeling the brunt of this. What I feel we need at this moment is not a kumbaya moment and pretend January 6th didn't happen, pretend all this corruption didn't happen. But it's about returning government back to the purpose of government, right? Which is investing in our communities and helping communities thrive. Right now, we're living in a society, particularly on Long Island, many of your viewers, it is hard to live here. It is hard to pay the bills and, make sure your children are safe. And it feels like we're being, and I'm a mom of 3, so I know this very well. It feels like we're being bombarded and attacked on every single front. And it's very, very stressful. It's very hard to live. It feels like we're living to survive. We're not living to thrive. And my candidacy is hoping to flip that around, get away from the nonsense, get away from the political discord, and let's bring forth solutions. Let's be transparent about who we are. Let's stop lying to voters. We hear it all the time. Politicians come by, and for years the guidance has been, don't talk about policy, just talk about values. And look where it's gotten us. I talk about policy all the time, because if I knock on your door and I tell you, here's what I'm running on, if I tell you I am a reproductive rights champion, they're going to say, what does that mean? I have a plan. I'm the only candidate in my race that has an actual plan to preserve and claw back reproductive rights. And I have a plan for all of it, for every single issue that I'm running on. This is what this moment needs. This moment isn't about kumbaya unity. This moment is about fighting for people.
Yeah, you're not going to get any kumbaya moments in this atmosphere. We're talking about, the environment that you're going to run in. To say it nicely, it's jaded. That's a nice way to say it.
It is.
Swamp is probably a better description. But so how do you get into a game like that and try to keep on the up and up and try to be the good guy? When you'll probably get sliced to ribbons.
Listen, this is my second election cycle. So,
so you're a veteran.
We've got some battle scars. And, I would say for anyone listening who may be thinking about doing the right thing and stepping up and running for office for the right reasons to fight for your community, it is the most shocking and surprising part of running for office is that it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. It truly doesn't. It doesn't matter where you stand. It doesn't matter how good your intent. People will come for you. And so you've got to steel your spine, and you've got to really hold true the reason you decided to step up and run. And that has to be so, so important. I happen to have these 3 incredible daily motivators, which are my 3 amazing children. As a mom, I cannot sit by and watch their world crumble and do nothing about it. So, as I mentioned, I can't sit and stir. I am a person that does well in motion. So I needed to step up. And I started my journey by managing campaigns and launching different organizations and just fighting and educate, for policy that would help people and educating our community. But yeah, look, they're coming for you either way. My hope is that, look, you're going to have all kinds of outside money coming into this race and trying to manipulate messaging. But we're the only campaign that's in the field, knocking doors and having real conversations with people. And as I said, we have flipped Republicans at the door because it's not as much as these, we're in this sort of team environment. You're either the blue team or the red team. I don't fully subscribe to that. I want to knock on your door. And if you're a Republican, this has happened. And they say, maybe I'm there for the spouse and I'm knocking on the door and the Republican answers. And they say, well, probably not going to vote for you because you're a Democrat. And I say, that's all right. I'm going to win anyway. And I'm going to represent you. So why don't you tell me some issues that matter, and we'll end up having a conversation. Because here's the real rub, right? It doesn't matter if you're a Republican or a Democrat. Your prescription drug prices are still going up. You still are paying more for healthcare, for less support and worse outcomes. It doesn't matter if you're a Republican or a Democrat because shooters are still coming into our kids' schools and shooting them up. Doesn't matter if you're a Republican or a Democrat because climate change is coming for you anyway, right? So I feel like I'm a different type of candidate. I don't come from the political establishment. I'm not connected to wealth. We grind every single day to fight for our community. And I think people are seeing that, and Republicans and Democrats alike. Now, look, I have been a candidate that sometimes ruffles some feathers because I don't subscribe to this team-based thinking. I registered as a Democrat when I was 18 years old because I thought we were the party of human rights and civil rights and social equity. I thought we were the party that took care of our community. Now, I did grow up on the South Shore, and I didn't know it at the time, but it's a very, very red community. But here's the thing. that community took care of each other. If there was a fire, the whole community would be there, with supplies. If someone lost their job, the whole community would be there. And I think those values are really resonating through my campaign now, right? So it's about reaching the people. It is about fighting. And to me, it's about prioritizing the needs of the entire electorate. So I'm not a candidate that's going to just line up behind, look, I'll be a candidate that will certainly criticize a lot of the GOP policies because I do not agree with most of them or maybe all of them. But I will also do it in the Democratic Party if I think they're going the wrong way. I am fighting to bring the party back to its FDR roots so that we invest in people and create communities where people can, as I said, where people can thrive and actually live a life of health, happiness, and
that was theoretically that was the original purpose.
The intent,
right?
Yes.
Right. To help the populace, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.
Pursuit of happiness, yes.
Right. The pursuit. They didn't say you'd be happy. They just said you could pursue it.
You could pursue it.
Right.
But that's the great thing about government, right? It is complicated. There are many factors influencing, for sure, that make it hard for us to move where we need to move. But at its best, the best version of government is decided by communities, right? We hope, right? I mean, we do need to get corporate money out of politics because it's definitely corroding and there is an outsized influence in selecting who represents us. But if we can move to a place where we are at our best, it means that our community is really voting and electing the representative that they think best represents their community, that will push for policies that will have a material impact in their lives.
Yeah. I think you're making it's like the idea, the Roe v. Wade, gun violence, and they are really connected to the corrupting influence of money. There's a meme going around, I'm sure you've seen it, it's been around for quite a while, where the members of Congress and the Senate would be wearing jackets with all of the decals for all the companies that they took money from.
Yeah, well, it's funny you should say that because when I ran in 2020 for this seat, I launched a policy called the Paid By Act. And it stands for Politician Accountability, Information Disclosures Benefiting You. And it's similar to that idea.
I bet that made you a lot of friends, huh?
Listen, but you know what? I'm not here to make friends.
I know. I love it.
My community, and yep. It's very much in that vein because, I do believe that Citizens United was a real failure. And I think like most people who learn about it, they also believe that it has no place in our current political system. It needs to be overturned. But if we're realistic, because of the influence of money, that'll be the fight of our lives. And it's probably going to take at least 20 years to overturn. So my thinking is, well, how do we take those steps to make it as hard as possible for those folks who are getting paid to pass or deny, policies? And this idea would be that after every vote, in any campaign ad or any type of, digital ad or TV ad, they would have to disclose on the bottom where they took money from. So let's say they were voting for lowering prescription drugs. And if they vote against it, well, let's see, is the insurance companies funding them? Is pharmaceutical companies funding them? Or who's funding them? And I think we need to make it easier for people to understand because folks understand lobbying. They understand that there are lobbyists. But I'm not quite so sure they understand just how deep that rot goes, right? And it's deep. It is deep.
Well, it's called bribery.
It is. It absolutely is. It's
called
legalized bribery because when lobbyists are funneling millions or even thousands of dollars into a campaign, they expect a return on investment. Let me tell you something.
They're not giving it to you for nothing. No,
that's right.
Sure.
And those representatives who have taken that money, they have been very happy to comply. And that return on investment has been huge for them. And it's been a huge loss for people like us.
Yeah, definitely. I think when that law first came into effect and we first heard that was going to, I don't think it took people a few months to see how it's going to work. I think they knew right as soon as the stroke of the pen put that into law that this is a bad thing.
Bad for us. It's bad for us for sure.
Yeah, it's some of that stuff is mind-boggling. But the interesting thing is you're not taking any corporate money for your campaign, are you?
No, I am not. And I think this is a real important line in the sand. I have had people call me, even supporters, and say, would you just consider it? It's so hard. How are you going to compete? Okay. And as I mentioned, in my race, this is so mind-blowing. So I have the most donations by far than any other candidate in the race. We have well over 5,000 contributions. I think I don't even know how many thousands, a lot. Mm-hmm. And most of my opponents have a few hundred. Yet they have quite a bit more money than I do, right? So if you think about it, a max contribution is $2,900 legally. You can actually double max and give $5,800 for, if the person wins the primary, they can use that money for the general election. So if you think about $1 million, you're looking at, 200 people or so donating. So if you're rich or if you're connected to wealth, that's pretty easy. But if you're not, and you're a people's candidate like I am, most of our donors, they give us $1, $3, $5, $10. We have a few folks that have given us, more, have been very generous over time. It has added up. A lot of folks give us a monthly contribution of $10 or $15. We're quite proud of that, right? Because we know we've got the support. But yet, you look at, even a lot of these endorsing groups, they'll say, oh, well, this candidate's more viable because they've got $1 million in the bank, but they may only have 100, 200 people that have given them that money, and I think this is where I think political education is really important because it is sort of ingrained in our brain that, oh, well, if a candidate has money, that must mean there's a lot of support, but that's not always true. No, right. And of course, lobbyists have complicated this tenfold, right? Mm-hmm. Where they can spend both, donating to campaigns, but then outside they can do what's called an independent expenditure and spend a lot more money.
Well, what other job does anybody work at where they get to make the rules for their job? None. I don't get to decide how much I'm going to make in my next week's paycheck.
That's right.
Every senator does. They actually create their own pay scale. I don't know. You know what? I'm not a big fan of internal compliance.
Yeah.
I'll say in general.
Of course.
I've seen it on the stock market. I've seen people trade, and they have guys looking over their shoulder. How much stuff falls through the net would boggle your mind. But they'll say, oh, we police ourselves. No, you don't.
That's right. And we've seen this over and over. Look at the Stock Act that we just saw. Even one of our local congressmen violated over 300 times, right? So we are seeing these effects, and we see it with sexual harassment, all of it. It's a completely unjust system. That is why I think more than ever, we need principled leaders that come from our community, that have community support. Because if we continue to elect the same representatives that are part of this broken system, I mean, it would be crazy of us to think that it would ever change. It's not going to change, right? And that's partly why we are so proud as a campaign to have built the coalition that we've built. We may not have, $1 million in the bank, but we have the support of our community. We have more endorsements than any campaign by like a multiple of 4 or 5. Hey. We have all of the community groups endorsing us. We have national groups, statewide groups, some really impressive organizations that I am frankly just so humbled because I respect the work that they do so much, so I'm humbled to have their backing in this race.
That's great. And good luck to you. We're kind of running out of time right now.
Oh, okay.
So you have to promise, and you did at the beginning of the show, that you'd come back because there are going to be new developments. There are going to be things happening in the news that, I have a few things here we didn't even get to. But you know what? It sounds good to me. You got a lot of guts, not taking any corporate money. And hopefully, if that works out for you, that'll become a trend. And if that becomes a trend, then the people may actually have a good political action committee, because that's what we need. The public needs its own PAC.
We absolutely do. We almost need to unionize all of us, right?
Right. Yeah, well, and there's another good point, too. Yeah.
That's right. If I could, Bill, just do a quick plug for my website. My website is D'Arrigo2022.com, DARRIGO 2022. If you'd like to volunteer or contribute, we would love to have you part of this campaign. We are making history. I'm going to be the first woman ever elected to this seat and the first candidate in possibly ever that is focused on building our community. So Beautiful. Come and join us.
All right. And right now, the clock on the wall is saying this week's Long Island News better move on out of here. We thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
And you folks can catch this week's Long Island News every Friday at 3 o'clock right here on the station that helps you communicate, 90.3 WHPC.